Hi, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar. Before we get started, we just wanted to take a quick moment to check in for access and make sure that everyone is able to see the interpreters that we have, as well as access the captioning services. So if you are not able to see the interpreter or see the captions, we'll pause for a moment so that you can put that information in the chat. And as an additional housekeeping matter, as you think of questions throughout this presentation, please feel free to put them in the Q&A button, the box on the chat, and we will answer those questions at the end. And if you'd prefer to voice your question at the end instead of writing it in the Q&A box, we can do that as well. So we're trying to save some time at the end for questions. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. My name is Megan Sorey, and Sarah and I are really excited to be presenting to you this afternoon. We're going to be talking about how college students and prospective college students can benefit from vocational services provided by the Division of Rehabilitation Services, or DRS. So before we get started into the substantive matter, I thought Sarah and I can just take a couple minutes to briefly introduce ourselves. So Sarah, do you want to go first with an introduction?
Hi, I'm Sarah Huttenlocker. I am a member of our CAP advocacy team here at Equip for Equality. I've been at Equip for Equality for about 2 years, and I've been working on CAP cases for about a year. And so I've gotten to work on a lot of different cases involving DRS providing post-secondary education services. And so this is a topic that I'm looking forward to talking about with you all.
Great, thanks, Sarah. And once again, my name is Megan Sorey, and I'm also a staff attorney at Equip for Equality. I've been with the agency for approaching 9 years now, and I've recently transitioned along with Sarah to being one of the attorneys on the Client Assistance Program, or CAP advocacy team. So I'm really excited to utilize all of my experience in a variety of areas of disability law and really concentrate on helping clients with disabilities access employment and vocational services. So really excited to be with you today. So on this first slide, we just wanted to provide a brief overview of Equip for Equality, in case some folks tuning into this webinar aren't familiar with our organization. So Equip for Equality, or EFE, as we also refer to ourselves, is what's known as the protection and advocacy system for the state of Illinois. And every single state and US territory has a P&A system like Equip for Equality. And so our mission is to advance the human and civil rights of people with disabilities in Illinois. And we do that by providing free legal assistance to people with disabilities about issues that are related to their disability. And here at Equip for Equality, we're kind of organized into 3 teams or departments. So the first of which is the civil rights team, and Sarah and I are both attorneys on that team. And so we do a lot of our traditional legal work. So anything from employment discrimination, housing discrimination, helping folks get physical or communication access to a private business. We also help people who are trying to get home services so that they can remain safely in their homes, and help defend people who are under a guardianship order and want to be their own guardian. So all of that falls under the civil rights team. So a lot of different things. And then we've also got the special education clinic, which works with students with disabilities and their families to make sure that they're receiving the necessary supports to get a free and appropriate public education. And last but not least, we have what's called the Independent Monitoring Unit. And so that team conducts abuse and neglect investigations and goes into facilities and settings where people with disabilities work and live to make sure that their rights are being protected. And I also wanted to provide on this slide a brief overview about the Client Assistance Program, or CAP. And for folks following along, we're on slide 3 of the presentation. And the Client Assistance Program is funded and established by the Rehabilitation Act. And the Rehabilitation Act is one of the 2 main federal laws that we are familiar with here in the disability world, the other of which being the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so the CAP program generally provides assistance to individuals who are either applying for or receiving services that are funded through the Rehabilitation Act. And so that includes vocational services provided by the Division of Rehabilitation Services, as well as independent living services that are provided by the wonderful network of Centers for Independent Living throughout our state. And kind of a lesser known aspect about the Client Assistance Program is that it exists to advise and inform individuals about their rights under Title I of the ADA. And Title I of the ADA is the provision that deals all with employment. So if you look across the country, most Client Assistance Program or CAP programs are actually housed outside of state government. And many of them are within the organization like Equip for Equality in their state. But here in Illinois, the CAP program was historically housed within state government. It was within the Division of Rehabilitation Services. But as of July 1st of 2022, so just a little over a year ago, the CAP program was redesignated from within DRS and was moved outside of state government into Equip for Equality. And that's when Sarah and I got involved with the CAP advocacy team. So on this next slide, we just wanted to share the contact information of the folks on our CAP team. So if you hear from us or receive emails, you'll know who we are. So Sarah and I are on this list as well as our contact information. The CAP program is also managed by our CAP director, Rachel Weisberg, who is kindly providing technical assistance behind the scenes today. And Rachel is a managing attorney at Equip for Equality. And we also have Emily Wilson, our colleague. She is a staff attorney on the Special Education Clinic. And so she brings a wealth of experience in working with youth transition issues. And so we're really grateful that she can bring that expertise to the CAP team. Oops. So the Division of Rehabilitation Services, or DRS, is housed within the Illinois Department of Human Services. And DRS administers a home services program that I mentioned for folks who need services to remain safely inside their homes and remain in the community. And DRS also administers the vocational program. So for purposes of eligibility for the Client Assistance Program, we're only talking about folks who are applying for or receiving services through DRS's vocational rehab program. Now at Equip for Equality, we definitely help folks who are needing home services or having issues with their home services. So you can reach out to Equip for Equality more generally, but the CAP program is specific to the vocational program. And the DRS vocational program is geared specifically towards employment. In fact, you can see that in its mission statement. The goals are to help folks prepare for, secure, maintain, and advance in employment. So you can see the employment-centric nature of its mission. And an individual can get connected to DRS via our services kind of in 2 main paths. The first of which being you can reach out to your local DRS office. And on slide 6, and I should mention that everyone will get a copy of the PowerPoint slides, and this presentation will be recorded as well and archived on our website. But there's a hyperlink to a DHS office locator tool where you can actually search for your local DRS office by putting in your county. So in some of the larger counties like Cook County here in Chicago, there are multiple DRS offices, but there may be only one DRS office serving a smaller county. So you can get the contact information that way. You can also fill out an online referral form. And again, the materials include a hyperlink to that online application. And regardless of if you reach out by phone or the online referral form, you will hear back from a DRS counselor within 30 days to complete that initial intake assessment and start that eligibility process for you. So next, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to start a deeper dive into the vocational services that are available through this program.
Yeah, and so after somebody reaches out to DRS to receive services, one of the first steps is to talk with the counselor to figure out an employment goal, and then also to figure out what services DRS can provide to help you meet your employment goal. And so depending on what somebody's employment goal is, there are a lot of different services that DRS can provide. Essentially, they can provide services that are necessary to help the person reach whatever their specific goal is. And so that can include providing assistive technology, paying for vocational evaluations if somebody's not entirely sure what they want to do or what fits with their skills, job training and job coaching, assistance with finding a job, help paying for supplies needed for employment, like a uniform, tools, licensure fees. In some cases, DRS can help with independent living support, like transportation to and from work-related meetings, or increased housing costs if there are changes in housing costs related to somebody's services. And then two things that we're going to talk about today are transition services and also post-secondary services and training services. Our main focus today is going to be on post-secondary service education services and training services, but we want to talk briefly about transition services. And so these are services that DRS provides to help youth with disabilities who are usually transitioning from school into either into employment or potentially into post-secondary education. And so there are a lot of different services that DRS can provide to this population, things like career counseling, help with college, job training, some very similar services to what they can provide to a customer who is already in the workforce, but tailored more towards the specific needs of students in transition. And so these services from DRS can be known as pre-employment transition services. And so these are those services designed to help youth prepare to enter the workforce and move towards greater independence. And so these are available to all students with a disability in Illinois. And you do not have to be a DRS customer already, and you do not need, and this does not take the place of like the VR eligibility process. So if after your transition, if you're still hoping to receive services, so if you would still need to go through the VR eligibility process, but these services are available to all students with a disability, and they are provided through partnerships with schools and local agencies. And so now we're going to talk about post-secondary education and training. And so these are services that DRS can provide to help customers obtain the training or credentials that they need in order to reach their individual employment goal. And so depending on what somebody's employment goals are, there are two basic types of training services that DRS can provide. There's degree training, and that includes trainings that includes help getting an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, also a graduate degree, or even a postgraduate degree. Each employment goal requires different different background, different credentials. And so depending on what your goal is, DRS can provide all the way up to postgraduate assistance. And then also it includes non-degree training. So this is vocational or technical training, help attending a trade school, help with if there's a licensure course you need to take. And so that also is a type of training service that DRS can provide. And so how can DRS help with training and post-secondary education? So there are many different ways, and one of the biggest ones is that they can help with tuition funding for college or other training programs. Another one that can be really helpful is assistance purchasing books or equipment that somebody might need for their classes. DRS can also help provide assistive technology if you need assistive technology to complete coursework. And also potentially DRS can help cover increased housing costs or living expenses. So if you need to relocate to go to school and your living costs increase because of that, DRS might be able to help with that increase or that difference. And so we're going to focus in on tuition assistance because that's something that a lot of people are interested and want to know more about. And so one of the main questions that we get is, how much of my tuition can DRS cover? What can they help with? And so for a degree program, DRS can generally cover the cost of attendance at an in-district community college or public university. So a community college or public university in Illinois, DRS can potentially, depending on the customer's specific situation and some other details that we'll go into a little bit later, DRS can potentially cover the entire cost of attendance if you're attending an in-state school. If you're attending a private or out-of-state program, DRS can still contribute. Generally, they can only contribute up to what they would pay if you were attending an in-state public program. So, if they would pay a certain amount if you attended a public university in state, they would pay that same amount towards your costs at an out-of-state university. However, DRS can sometimes make exceptions and cover more of private or out-of-state tuition if there are extenuating circumstances related to the customer's disability that require the customer to attend the private or out-of-state program. So if because of your disability, there's a really specific thing that you need a program to have, and there's only one program that has it and it's in a different state, then DRS can potentially make an exception and help with more of your costs to go to that school, even if they normally would only pay up to the cost of attending an in-state school. And so for non-degree programs, DRS can generally contribute up to the total cost leading to the industry recognized credential required to achieve the employment outcome. And so the way that they sort of, come up with what that is usually it's based on they usually base that maximum financial contribution on the total cost of obtaining the credential you're looking for at an Illinois community college, unless the training can be obtained at a lower cost elsewhere, in which case they might base on that. If there are no programs available at an Illinois community college that lead to that credential, so there's no way that you could go and get that at a community college, DRS will annually establish a set maximum contribution that they can typically towards that credential that you're looking to get. And so, when we're talking about how much DRS can cover, we're talking about previously we were talking about what is the maximum. And so, while that is the maximum generally that DRS can cover, there are also instances where DRS does not cover that full amount. And so the total amount of tuition funding that DRS can provide for both degree and non-degree training programs is reduced by any available comparable benefits, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and also any required customer financial contributions. And we'll talk about that more in a second as well. And so first, to talk a little bit more about comparable benefits, this is the term that DRS uses for basically available services that could offset costs that DRS would otherwise be paying. So if there is another source that could pay for part of your education, or if there's another way that you could get with, at no cost to yourself, the assistive technology that you're looking for from DRS, then that might be considered a comparable benefit. And that is something where you would be obligated to apply for and accept that comparable benefit if there is one available. And so in terms of how this works with tuition funding, generally public financial aid awards, so that in Illinois can include things like MAP and Pell grants, are considered to be comparable benefits. So you have an obligation to apply for those awards and to accept them if you receive them. And then DRS's contribution to your educational costs would be decreased by the amount of those, because then that portion of those costs is being covered by MAP and Pell. also certain non-merit scholarships are considered comparable benefits, especially if they are restricted. So if you get a scholarship and it says you can only spend this on tuition, and that scholarship might be used as a comparable benefit and might reduce the amount that DRS would provide. And so then there are also some awards that are not necessarily considered comparable benefits. And so private awards, from like a private university or organization, especially if they're unrestricted, and also merit scholarships, again, if they're unrestricted, which means they don't have any restrictions on what they can be used for. If you can maybe put them towards your book costs or your housing costs, you don't need to necessarily use them specifically for tuition. In those cases, those resources are not considered to be comparable benefits. So the amount that DRS is providing is not reduced by those resources. And so, and what this all kind of means in the end is that to receive tuition assistance from DRS, customers, in order to show that they have applied for and accepted any comparable benefits that are available, they need to complete a FAFSA and provide DRS with proof of award or denial of financial aid so that DRS can get a sense of how much tuition they can provide under the circumstances. And so now we're going to turn to customer financial contribution. And so in some cases, DRS requires customers to cover some of the costs for their training services. And this can depend on, sometimes there are general rules. As an example, DRS generally requires customers who are obtaining graduate degrees to cover 10% of their graduate tuition. And also in other cases, DRS can base this assessment on somebody's personal finances, their family's finances, and determine the amount that they can potentially ask somebody to contribute towards their services. And so it's very dependent on the customer's specific circumstances and what they will end up having to contribute or might be asked to contribute. And one thing we do want to note is that customers who receive Social Security benefits are exempt from any financial contribution requirements. And so that even includes, for example, that 10% graduate tuition amount that DRS usually requires from people who are obtaining graduate degrees. If you receive Social Security benefits, you are exempt from that. All right, and so now we're going to talk a little bit about how to apply for these services. And so Megan went over this a little bit earlier, but the first step to receive any DRS service is to submit a referral. And so we shared earlier that link to how to submit a referral online. And after you've submitted a referral, DRS will reach out within 30 days to schedule an initial intake interview. And at that interview, a counselor will meet with you and will ask about your employment goals, what services you're hoping to receive. And after the interview, or sometimes even at the interview, depending on how, if you have a good idea of what you're looking for, DRS will ask you for information and documents so that they can both determine your eligibility for services and finish processing your application and getting all the information that they need in order to get approval for those services that you're looking for. And so some examples of documents that DRS might ask you for in a case where you're looking for help with college is a copy of your transcript from high school, or from, if you've attended college previously, a copy of your transcript from when you previously attended, your college acceptance letter, if you already know what program you're looking to attend, documentation of your disability, that goes towards determining your eligibility for services. And then information about financial aid, like we mentioned earlier, so showing that you've completed that FAFSA and what financial aid you've been awarded, if any. And so once you've provided your counselor with the necessary documentation, your counselor will draft what's called a college case summary, outlining your requested services and all the details about what financial aid you're getting, what the costs are for your tuition. And they will submit that to their supervisor for approval. And then once their supervisor approves that summary, your counselor's next step is to draft an individualized plan for employment, which DRS drafts in all of their cases. And it basically is a document that outlines what your employment goal is and what services DRS is going to provide to help you get there. And once that's been drafted, it's signed by both the customer and their counselor. And so in a college case, that will include your, college services, and it will list if they're providing tuition or if they're helping with books and things like that. And, one thing that we do want to note is that In order for DRS to provide tuition funding for a particular course or semester, there must be a signed IPE approving the funding before the start of classes. So it's really important if you think you want to get tuition assistance from DRS that you start that process as early as possible so that you'll hopefully have time to get approved before the start of your upcoming course or semester. Because if you don't have that signed IPE before the class starts, then DRS can't retroactively approve it.
This is Megan. So we thought it would be helpful to provide some information about what you can expect in terms of your responsibilities once DRS has determined that some educational training services will be a part of that IPE. What can you expect from that relationship with your DRS counselor in terms of providing information and communicating with your counselor? So the first tip for best practice is applicable to anyone receiving DRS vocational services, and that is to really keep in regular communication with your counselor to keep them updated about your educational progress. So making sure that you're responsive to emails and phone calls, and if problems arise, that you're letting them know so that they're aware of what's going on and can help brainstorm potential solutions and how to resolve those issues. Also, if you're receiving DRS funding for tuition, you're responsible for maintaining a 2.0 grade point average during each grading period. The next point is really critical, just making sure that you, and it's a corollary with making sure that you're in regular communication with your counselor, but making sure that you receive prior approval before making any changes to your class schedule. So if you need to drop a class or you decide you want to add a class or switch something around, make sure that you're communicating that to your DRS counselor before you're making those changes with your school. And at the start of each new semester or each grading term, if you're on, a trimester schedule or quarterly, you will be responsible for providing your DRS counselor some critical pieces of information. So you will have to give them a copy of your upcoming class schedule for that term, a tuition bill if you receive that from your college or university, as well as your book list. And if DRS has agreed to provide any type of housing assistance, so any of those bills as well should all be provided to your DRS counselor at the start of the semester. And then you also have an obligation to follow up with your DRS counselor at the end of the term because they need to see that you're maintaining the appropriate grade point average. So you need to follow up with your counselor to send a copy of your transcript or your grades for that particular term. And just like anyone who is receiving DRS vocational services, you're going to meet at least annually with your counselor to discuss your IPE goals, the IPE being that document that Sarah was talking about, explaining what your goals are and the services that DRS is providing. So you'll be meeting with your counselor at least annually, and more often than that, if at any point you need to make any changes or amend your IPE. So we thought it might be helpful to just kind of look at some scenarios and sort of test what we've been learning and see how that really comes out in practice. And these hypothetical scenarios are very much the types of calls and clients that Sarah and I work with who contact the client assistance program. So we thought these examples might be helpful. So the first hypothetical situation is Grace. Grace is a college student at State University, and she has a learning disability. She needs to request accommodations for her classes, such as a note taker and extended time on tests and quizzes. What steps should she take? And we wanted to take a couple minutes if folks had thoughts, if they could put their thoughts in the chat or the Q&A. Perhaps Sarah, if you're able to see that, or Rachel, you could maybe let me know what folks are responding. And then we'll talk through it together. Sarah, is there anything in the chat? Not a problem. We can just all talk through it together. So turning.
We did just get something in the chat.
Oh, great. Please.
Barb Cohen said, bring a copy of a recent psych eval or IEP or 504 plan to the DRC.
Great. That's absolutely a perfect suggestion. So here on the tips of how Grace should resolve these issues, point one is actually speaking to Barb's point about registering with your college or university's disability services office. And one of the requirements for registering is to provide that documentation explaining your disability. So it's absolutely right that a 504 plan or IEP from high school, if Grace has that, that would be super helpful in communicating with the college to explain what her disability is, some services that were provided before, and what she thinks she'll need to be successful in college. And I think it's helpful to say at the outset that it can be a difficult transition moving from the K through 12 system into college. The IEP process that's built into that K through 12 setting is very different from a college setting where a student has to self-identify as a person with a disability and initiate that contact with the Student Disability Services Office. And one thing we wanted to note is DRS may be able to assist individuals in getting evaluations or testing that could then be used to request accommodations. So sometimes people aren't as lucky as Grace, where they might have a copy of an old IEP or 504 plan. So if that's a situation, they can reach out to DRS for assistance with identifying a provider that might be able to do some testing for a learning disability and then use that evaluation to present to the college. So great job, everyone. So we've got another example with our hypothetical student named Harry. And Harry is a college student, and he has already registered with the Disability Services Office at his school and has been approved for accommodation. But he encounters a problem that a lot of our clients encounter, where one of Harry's professors is not allowing him to use his approved accommodations on exams. So the questions that we're thinking about are, what should Harry do, number one, and how can DRS and CAP potentially help? So I'll pause for just a minute to see if anyone wants to post their thoughts in the chat or Q&A. Sarah, do we have any thoughts or responses?
Barb said, talk to the college DRC first, but then utilize the attorneys at Equip for Equality.
Great. Thank you, Barb, again for your participation. We really appreciate that. And we'll go to the next slide, and that is exactly right, and typical to some advice that we would give. So it's great that Harry is registered with the Disability Services Office, and he should be assigned to a counselor. So a great starting point would be reaching out to that counselor and explaining, hey, I have my accommodations that are approved, but Professor Smith is not allowing them. And hopefully that disability services counselor can advocate for Harry and speak with the professor to clarify what should be provided. Another great resource would be, and again, I apologize for not making it clear. So I think we're assuming that Harry is connected with DRS and is receiving vocational services. So another great resource would be reaching out to his DRS counselor to loop them into the situation. And this illustrates what we were saying before about being in regular communication with your counselor to let them know what's going on and if you're encountering issues. So this would be a great point to reach out to that counselor and explain what's going on. And hopefully the DRS counselor could also work together with Harry and with the Disability Resource Center at the school to brainstorm issues. And this is also a situation like Barb mentioned, where Harry can reach out to Equip for Equality and the Client Assistance Program. In fact, Harry and his DRS counselor can even reach out to us together. We can brainstorm what's going on and figure out if there's some ways to resolve the situation. We can provide a lot of advocacy assistance behind the scenes, so it doesn't create an adversarial situation where a lawyer is automatically getting involved in talking to the school. But we can talk through things and see if there's ways for us to resolve these issues quickly so that Harry can continue. Okay, you all did great with those hypothetical situations, and I hope that just illustrates some of the points that we've been talking about and kind of seeing how they come about in practice. So this next question is something that we receive a lot. So Sarah was talking about how DRS can provide assistance for college tuition. Remember, we were talking about potential limits to that amount. We were talking about financial contribution, all of those important concepts. So sometimes we get calls from individuals who are approved by DRS to receive college tuition, but something has happened for one reason or another. DRS has not issued payment for a particular semester. And undoubtedly, that creates a really stressful situation. So folks are trying to figure out what to do. So in these situations, we would advise the individual first, just kind of as a best practice, as soon as they realize there's an issue with DRS not sending payment, like if they get some communication from their financial aid department, reach out to your DRS counselor, find out what's going on and alert them to the issue. It could be something simple to resolve, just like a billing issue or something like that that can be quickly resolved and reduce a lot of stress on your part. But if there's some other reason that payment has been delayed or that DRS is saying that they won't pay, it's important to get that information early on, and you can communicate that with us when you reach out to the Client Assistance Program. If you need to, you can file a timely appeal for the denial of services. So DRS customers, one of your really important due process rights is anytime you feel like you are not getting the services that you need, if DRS says that they won't provide certain services or they're stopping them, you can file an appeal. And you're asking to review that decision and hopefully get a different result. Obviously, that's why you're asking for the decision, because you disagree with DRS's decision. So you can reach out to the Client Assistance Program after you've filed an appeal with any of these cases, with these tuition cases or any issues concerning your DRS services. And we can then reach out as an additional layer of advocacy to the counselor and try to figure out what's going on. So we've shared a lot of great information today. We hope that you find it great and helpful about the Client Assistance Program and specifically DRS services in the post-secondary setting. But we want to make sure you know how to reach us. So we've told you in lots of slides, this is great to contact us. So this is how you can do it. We have a designated webpage, which is www.equipforequality.org/CAP. We've also got a dedicated CAP hotline number, which is 855-452-2725, and a CAP email address, which is pretty simple. It's cap@equipforequality.org. And when you receive a copy of these presentation materials, you can see an earlier slide, which has all of the email addresses for Sarah, myself, and Rachel, and Emily on our CAP team. So you can feel free to reach out to any of us individually with any questions. So I think that concludes our presentation. Thank you all for your attention and participation. And please let us know if you have any questions by entering them in the Q&A, or you can feel free to voice them aloud if that's easier for you.
Yeah, and we have a couple of questions already in the Q&A. And so I'm going to take a look at those. I will. So Barb looks like has sent in two questions, and the first is there an income cap to have DRS help get evaluations? And so that is a good question. And it depending on the type of evaluation you're referring to, I'm assuming you're thinking either an evaluation to determine eligibility for services, maybe by like helping somebody get a neuropsych eval, like Megan mentioned in her hypothetical earlier, or potentially an evaluation to help somebody determine their needs in terms of what services they could benefit from or what employment goals might work for them. And the answer to that is that there should not be an income cap for those. There are certain DRS services that are exempt from the comparable benefits analysis that we talked about earlier. And I believe that one of those, off the top of my head, I believe one of those is is services to help determine eligibility and employment needs. So I believe that there would not be a comparable benefits analysis, so somebody's income would not come into it with that service. And then Barb's next question is does DRS have a budget wherein they determine VR support based on level of need, i.e. deny college supports if they are out of money? Megan, do you want to take that one? Do you want me to?
Sure, we can certainly tag team that, Sarah. So DRS on a primary level is not supposed to refuse services like a class or category of services because they don't have enough money in the budget. And without getting too into the particulars, if a state DRS agency determines that they don't have the resources to meet the needs of folks who are eligible, then they have to go on, it's a process of going on an order of selection list. And that's reflecting, when the situation has gotten truly dire and they're not able to meet the needs. But they shouldn't be denying a type of service that an individual needs based on the cost. So it shouldn't be a situation if you have two people coming in and one person's employment goal requires them to go to college, and another person may need just an item of assistive technology. DRS shouldn't be favoring the less expensive individual. Sarah, do you want to chime in as well?
That's exactly what I would have said.
Oh, perfect.
And then we have another one from Amy Gray, who asks, I most frequently connect clients to DRS for employment goals. However, if a client wants DRS assistance to complete a degree in the education support program, how difficult would it be to switch back to employment support if she is denied entry to a college program this year? If denied, she'd need support to focus on getting a job before reapplying next semester. And then ask, does my question make sense? Yes, your question does make sense. And I'll take this one and then Megan can jump in if she has anything to add. So, this is an interesting question because this is something that does come up in cases where DRS, they help people towards one employment goal at a time. So if an employment goal requires going to get a degree, then that's typically when they're providing support with college tuition and things like that. Versus, if somebody's looking to find employment and they know what they want to do, they have the credentials they need, and they maybe need help finding a job or assistance with assistive technology, things like that. And so there is a distinction there and kind of two distinct tracks. But, you can switch back and forth. You can go to one. It usually involves changing your employment goals. So, and it's also an interesting question too, that you're saying in this circumstance, the person has not yet been admitted into a program. And so I think the conversation that they would need to have with their counselor is they would need to talk with their counselor about the fact that they are interested in this particular employment goal that does involve getting a degree. But they're still kind of at those preliminary stages of figuring out where they can go to school, applying for programs. They can potentially talk with DRS and, DRS unless somebody's been admitted to a program and they've been able to fill out a FAFSA and those sorts of things. It would be too soon probably to talk about approval for tuition funding, but DRS can potentially start providing like supports to assist with the process of applying for schools or other steps to help work towards that eventual employment goal. And, and if the person ends up not getting into that program and they need to change their employment goal, to finding, a job more in the present, then that's something they can then talk to their counselor about at that point. And they can say, hey, I need to amend my goal and I'm looking to get a job. And then, they can take it as it comes. So it's really mainly about communication with your counselor and making sure you're on the same page about what your goals are and when you need to shift those goals. Megan, do you have anything else on that one?
No, I think you handled that perfectly. And I just wanted to add that it's certainly not uncommon for folks to connect with DRS when they're wanting to do something entirely different, whether that's, switching to a different career field, which often might require going to school. So I just want to put that out there because sometimes folks are nervous if their particular DRS goal maybe doesn't align with their previous employment history. That's absolutely something that can be worked out through your IPE. Sarah, do you see any additional questions in the chat? I don't think.
Amy thanked us for our answer, but other than that, nothing else yet. Give it a couple more minutes.
Sure thing. And while people are thinking if they have any last minute questions, the contact information for the client assistance program is available in the chat, as well as a link to complete a survey with feedback about today's training. We really appreciate your attendance and any feedback that you can share with us. So thank you in advance.
Oh, we just got another one from Barb. Have you ever known DRS to pay for supports a student needs in college, e.g. executive functioning coaching? I mean, you want to take that? You want me to? Or?
Yeah, I haven't had a specific case dealing with that, but I see it as a support that would be necessary for a student to be successful in college. So I certainly don't think it's beyond the realm of possibility for DRS to provide that. Sarah, do you have any additional thoughts?
No, I agree. I think that is something where could fall within those additional supports that DRS can provide to help a student succeed.
I don't think we're seeing any additional questions unless I'm missing something. Sarah, are we?
No, I think it's all for now. So yeah, if there's no other questions, we can wrap up a little bit early. And as Megan mentioned, you'll all have a copy of the presentation. So you'll have a copy of our contact information. And please, if you think of any questions in the future, always feel free to reach out, and we are happy to answer anything we can.
Thank you all so much, and have a great rest of your day and week. Bye.